One of the greatest barriers to receiving healthcare in the United States is the cost of prescription drugs. According to a recent Gallup poll in 2021, 18 million Americans, or 7% of the U.S. population, cannot afford their prescription medications. Take people living with diabetes, for example. Over 10% of the population has either type 1 or type 2 diabetes, many of whom require insulin injections in order to maintain stable blood glucose levels. However, a quarter of diabetic patients report no longer being able to afford their doses, so they ration their supply, which can be dangerous and potentially fatal. In the last decade, the list prices of common types of insulin have tripled, even though they're the exact same products offered 10 years ago.
When I got really sick and I got my diagnosis finally, it was a relief. And then I get these medication costs and I am horrified.
All of my medications combined, it's around $155,000 a year. This $155,000 a year, I just don't think about it, because if I think about it, I panic. And it's not something that I can actually run away from. It's there. It's always going to be there until something is done about it.
Cost barriers are especially detrimental for patients like Savannah who suffer from chronic health conditions. The Affordable Care Act has improved coverage for low and middle-income Americans, but still, nearly 25% of low-income adults report skipping prescription doses because of high costs. A study completed in 2020 has forecast over 1.1 million Medicare patients could die within the next decade because of staggering prices. And in 2019, 34 million people reported knowing at least one friend or family member in the last 5 years who could not afford necessary medical treatment and subsequently died. From 2007 to 2018, branded pharmaceutical products have increased in price by 159%. Suppose the cost of drugs in the United States continues its current upward trajectory. In that case, non-adherence to drug therapy related to cost will become the leading cause of death in the U.S., ahead of kidney disease, diabetes, influenza, and pneumonia. And millions more will experience declining health conditions, resulting in higher medical expenses and costing Medicare an extra $177.4 billion by the year 2030.
The United States government does not negotiate the prices of new prescription drugs when they are introduced into the market. Instead, price negotiations often happen behind closed doors between three key players: pharmaceutical companies, insurers, and pharmacy benefit managers, which are the middlemen between drug companies and insurers. The pharmaceutical companies set a drug's list price based on what they believe the market will bear. They are trying to recuperate the cost it took to bring the drug to market, which is on average between $500 and $800 million. The drug companies also have to account for the 96% drug discovery and development failure rate and recover those expenses. If we think about what influences the price of drugs, we usually only think of the pharmaceutical companies who made them and are selling them. However, we don't typically purchase our medications directly from a pharmaceutical, but rather we buy them over the counter at a grocery store, receive them at the hospital, or purchase them at a pharmacy, all of whom have to negotiate with a pharmaceutical selling it to them. If you take it one step further, you realize the insurance companies also influence the price by negotiating with the hospitals and the pharmacies about what percentage of the drug costs they will pay and how much the patient will pay. And this is where a player called the pharmacy benefit managers, also called PBMs, enter the scene and influence the price of drugs. PBMs negotiate with pharmaceuticals to give a rebate to the insurance companies so that the insurance companies will place their drug in a higher tier in their drug formulary. The tier an insurance company places their drug in is interesting and important to the pharmaceuticals because when insurance companies place their drug in a higher tier, patients and providers are more likely to use it. And this leads to higher drug production volume, aka more money for the pharmaceuticals.
The cost for research and development of the top 20 drugs in the U.S. was $80 billion, an impressive number. There's a $40 billion profit margin, and that's the price we pay.
This is because first-in-class medications have astronomically high prices because there's nothing on the market to compete with it. For drugs entering a crowded disease category with other options, the new drug will often be priced similarly to its competitors. PBMs then negotiate with manufacturers and insurers to get drugs listed and establish prices through a rebate. For example, a drug could be listed for $1,000 and have a $400 rebate for the insurers, meaning the manufacturer makes $600 on that medication. The pharmacy benefit managers and insurers will split the $400 rebate, and this incentivizes the insurer to list this drug in his formulary. In other words, the bigger the rebate, the greater the incentive for the insurer to include this drug higher the tier formulary. It seems complex, but essentially PBMs are incentivized to negotiate for higher rebates rather than lower list prices, since they share those rebates with insurers. Drug makers know PBMs want larger rebates, so they raise the list price of the drug and offer a larger rebate. And this is where it gets vague and murky and shady, because none of the data about the rebates is available to the public, as pharmaceuticals, PBMs, and insurance companies call it proprietary information.
The U.S. competitive marketing system allows market competition to control medication pricing, leading to higher medication prices in the U.S. than in other countries, which allows pharmaceutical companies to make significant profits. In contrast, the government in many other countries directly or indirectly manages drug costs. Take Canada, for example. The Federal Patented Medicine Prices Review Board is a governmental agency in Canada that has the power to challenge any price of a patented drug. This power comes from a Canadian federal patent law. There is no bargaining that goes on to reduce the drug prices. The agency will simply declare a price to be an illegal abuse of patient rights and then cap the price. That is why drug prices in Canada are considerably less expensive than in the United States. Research on 20 popular brand name drugs found a possible average savings of 70% when purchased in Canada. Many of these medications treat chronic conditions or are considered life-saving. For example, due to government regulation, the average cost per unit of insulin in the United States had increased 10.3% compared with only 0.01% in Canada.
Well, what can we do as nurses to help provide damage control in our workplaces? For starters, we can ensure our patients are equipped with the proper education to make informed decisions about their medication purchases. It is our unstated duty to alert our patients that the cash price for many of the prescriptions might be less than the insurance copay for the same medication. We can advocate for our patients by having open and honest conversations with them, and considering that brand name medications almost always cost more than the generic product, we can request that the provider prescribe the generic version if it is available. Lastly, as nurses, we can vote for progressive policies that support universal healthcare options and housing for all. We can write to our state and federal legislatures, urging them to prioritize regulating drug prices. Currently, there is a congressional bill called H.R. 3, the Lower Drug Costs Now Act. It was passed in the House in December 2019 and is now waiting to be passed in the Senate. Nurses should use their platform of trust and protection to demonstrate for more equitable treatment. Washington nurses should consider writing to their senators, Maria Cantwell and Patty Murray, imploring them to advocate for constituents by voting yes on H.R. 3.
I've really enjoyed working with Patients for Affordable Drugs, and it's become a really amazing way for me to take some power back, because oftentimes when you're sick, you feel helpless. And now feeling empowered as a patient to use my story and effect real change.